GiFang.com. G to collect, Fang, properties. GiFang, collecting properties in Chinese. Hi and welcome to GiFang.com, and thank you for your time in listening to this presentation on a little bit more about us, about the Chinese buyers, Chinese market, and how we can potentially put you in the right place to market your properties and your brands to Chinese buyers and the Chinese market. So let's show you some photos, facts and figures. So those photos are taken by our media partners and sales partners in China, and those things happen every single day. The Chinese property exhibitions, the seminars, the road shows. Now those photos are for Chinese developers in China, with Chinese buyers buying properties in China. In one of the recent launches in Shandong, a province in China, a developer launched a project with 300 apartments, and within 5 hours, first day, 265 were sold, which is pretty amazing, but it happens every day in China. So those people in the photos really represent just a small fraction of the 1.6 billion people in China. But in Australia, Chinese were the largest non-Australian property buyer group in Australia. We represent the largest migrant group in Australia. And in China, there are 60,000 billionaires. Each billion in renminbi, or the Chinese dollar we call it, represents to 150 million Australian dollars. There are 60,000 of them with more than a billion renminbi. Now in China, out of all the high net worth investors, 83% of them are online every single day, searching for different opportunities for them to invest. Now for those with more than 100 million renminbi in cash to invest, 27% of them have already invested or migrated overseas. Out of the rest of the 73%, 47% are planning to do so in the next 12 to 24 months. Now that means a growth of 4.6% per year. So let's take a look at the trend now with the Chinese buying overseas, and in particular, Chinese buyers buying in Australia. So let's take a look at the timeline. From 2005 to 2008, every year, there was about 2.8 billion US dollars worth of properties bought by Chinese overseas. And out of that, as you can see in the little darker blue section there, about 1 in every 20-25 properties bought by Chinese overseas was in Australia. Now the total number increased by nearly 3 times in the year after, from 2.8 to 7.2. Now that number nearly tripled again in the year after, and nearly doubled again in the year after, nearly doubled again in the year after, and we predict by 2013 and 2014, in each of those 2 years, there will be about 80 billion US dollars worth of properties bought by Chinese overseas. Now in layman terms, the growth in the last 8 years, there's been 720% growth of Chinese buying overseas. Now what about Australia? Well, as I said back then, in 2005 to 2008, about 1 in every 20-25 properties back then was bought in Australia. Not anymore. Well, in 2013, there was probably about 1 in 3 or 1 in 2.5 properties bought overseas by Chinese was in Australia. So in the last 8 years, we've seen Chinese buying in Australia increase by a whooping 4,500%. Talking about commissions made by Australian agents to Chinese sales, in 2012 there was close to $370 million made by Australian agents for Chinese sales, and that number increased by more than 50% every year. In fact, until probably the end of 2014, we predict that number to increase by 100%, so double. You probably have a question now in your head. Why do Chinese people love to buy in Australia? Well, let's just answer exactly that question. Let's look at what it's like to buy a property in China versus buying and living in Australia. Well, in China, we have a very strange policy that says every person can buy up to 1 investment property in China. Well, surprise, surprise, where else do you expect the cash to go? In China, people buying properties will incur very high tax, very high price too per property. Just perhaps give an example. In Shanghai, which I'm sure is a city that you've heard of, China, a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Shanghai would cost somewhere between 2 million to 2.5 million Australian dollars. If you buy a residential property in China, you own it for 70 years. With residential property in China, there is a 70 years leasehold, and with commercial properties, there is usually a leasehold between 40 to 50 years. Whereas buying and living in Australia is a completely different story. We have quality education for our kids, personal safety, much better physical environment, better quality of water and air. And in terms of investments, low prices for properties, more land, ownership, better investments, and much more freedom than China. So talking about quality education, about 85% of Chinese families want their kids to study abroad. And boy, do they want to buy properties. And very often Chinese parents are very generous when it comes to buying properties for the kids. So let's talk a little bit more about ourselves, who we are, what we do, and what we can potentially do to help you to market your brands and your properties to Chinese buyers and the Chinese market. We have two websites, gifang.com in Chinese, Mandarin, and our properties.com.au in English. Both websites have exactly the same content, same properties, synchronized within 24 hours and bilingual, so two languages. We're the number one site for Chinese property buyers finding Australian properties, both from China and from Australia. And that number one is ranked based on the traffic coming from China and Australia to Australian properties only. We market for Australia Asia's agents and developers, both online and offline. Online in the sense that not only do we market to you and your brand and your properties through our web portal, but we also use many digital applications that is widely used by Chinese investors. Offline in the sense that we co-host and host and facilitate many roadshows, seminars and property exhibitions on behalf of Australia Asia's agents and developers to market and sell directly to Chinese buyers. We're established by a Chinese investor for Chinese investors. We talk to them every single day. We know exactly what they're thinking, what their needs and wants are, and we are here to establish a link between the needs and wants and themselves to you and what you have. And therefore, we're focused more on delivering buyers to you. So not only do we help you with sales and listing, adding potentially a very unique point of difference to your listing kit or listing tool. We send out inquiries to you. We'll also send out or refer clients and vendors to you, and you'll learn a bit more about that in the next few slides. So let's elaborate a little bit more on exactly how we can help you. So let's look at that in 6 ways. First one being high precision marketing. Well, basically from our website, we know which particular sector of the audience are looking for commercial properties, rural properties, luxury properties, rental, and buying normal house and land packages or apartments or established homes. So we market your properties and your brand with high precision to exactly the market that it's tailored to. Advertise. Well, what that means to us is we help buyers find you and find your properties. We help you to reach out to buyers, interact with buyers not only on our web portal but also through many other digital applications widely used by Chinese nowadays. Basically, that means making you stand out and sell the property, sell your image. Now, the way we position ourselves in the marketplace is we're a marketing and a media platform. So speaking of media, we do a lot of press release both in China and Australia. So by having you on board, we can do a lot of press release articles, stories to promote your brand in what we call soft news or soft articles. Events, that's where things get exciting, and a lot of developers and agents who came with us to China to host events such as roadshows and expos, I believe it was a great eye-opener for them. They can engage with buyers as well as our sales channels face-to-face directly to liaise with marketing and sales to offshore buyers. We'll also host those events locally as well. Translations, no language, no problems. Often we get a question asked by agents saying, it's good that we are now getting Chinese inquiries, Chinese buyers, but when these Chinese buyers sent out a Chinese inquiry, how are we supposed to understand it? Well, no matter it's English inquiry or Chinese inquiry, the guarantee is you will receive that within no time. So it's real time, it's instant. When they send out an inquiry from their end, you'll get it within seconds. But if a Chinese user sends out a Chinese inquiry, our dedicated translation team in China will translate the Chinese inquiry to English inquiry and forward it on to you within 24 hours, or actually generally within 5 hours. And once you receive it, if you want to respond it, you can respond it to us in English. We'll then translate it to you into Chinese and then bounce it back to the Chinese user. So no worries, we got it all covered for you. Last but not the least, referrals. Well, we get a lot of phone calls from China and Australia-based Chinese asking us, well, we need a property that suits our needs or wants. Well, in that case, all we do is we refer that contact, whether it's a buyer or a vendor, to you. And in one of the last few slides, you'll see one example of a Chinese buyer who came from the website, flew over to Melbourne, and we actually help him or help them to bid at a particular auction. So bringing Chinese buyers to your doorstep. Now, some general stats now about our audience distribution. We currently have more than 850,000 unique visitors per month. That's close to 2.5 million monthly views, property views per month. And generally the traffic comes from China. More than 70% of them come from Greater China, which includes China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Macau. And more than 15% of the traffic come from Australia. There is also traffic in Malaysia, Singapore, Japan, Korea, North America, and others. We cover 322 cities in China, and the hotspots are Canton Province, which include Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and Dongguan, the Zhejiang Province, which includes Wenzhou, Hangzhou, Ningbo, and of course the Beijing and Shanghai, which are the most popular cities in China. So here is a demographic showing the traffic and the amount of hits per, in this case, per major city or per province. So the Shanghai and Beijing clients prefer apartments, and the Canton and Zhejiang province prefer house and land. Generally, for Chinese who hold Chinese citizenship, they cannot buy established properties in Australia unless they have friends and family here in Australia who are already Australian permanent residents or Australian citizens. They can purchase properties by them or set up companies in Australia, Australia registered companies, and using the company structure they can buy pretty much anything else. And our role is to educate the Chinese market in investing in Australia. Now, just so you know, in 2011 to 2012, out of the top 10 cities in China in terms of average earning per head, the top 10 cities, apart from Shanghai, all the other 9 cities come from Canton and Zhejiang province. So those two provinces are now ranked and regarded commonly as the two most wealthiest provinces in China, and we cover a lot of their audience. Now, because we've done a lot of work behind the scenes in terms of offline marketing, going to different seminars, roadshows, and exhibitions to promote ourselves, as well as doing a lot of things to let the properties on our website dominate the search engines, we've seen some absolutely amazing growth in the last 2 years. Every quarter we measure our traffic, and back in 2011 our traffic was less than 500,000, and in 2 years we've increased by close to 400% in terms of unique visitors coming to our website per month. In the same time, we've increased our property views or page views by more than 430% in 2 years. Now, a lot of credits goes to our China's team in doing marketing and promotion of our website, as well as people and companies on our website in China. Now, we do a lot of surveys as well. In one of the surveys we did towards the end of August, we found that more than 63% of our audience are planning to invest or buy in Australia within the next 1 to 12 months. In fact, about 20% of them have already purchased properties. About 6.7% of them have already purchased 2 properties in Australia. And there's a lot of people looking to buy Australian properties in the next few years too. In terms of migrating or moving to Australia, about close to 30% of them are actually in Australia already, and more than 43% of them are looking to migrate or move to Australia within the next 1 to 12 months. So Australia is surely becoming a very popular country, a very popular destination, I should say, to the Chinese. Every month, for agents and developers who subscribe to us, we generate reports to you detailing the number of views per property, inquiries, views per salesperson, and the views per offers. And we send those stats automatically to your mailbox or to the mailbox of your admin or marketing manager. A few of our clients include Barry Plants, Big & Scott, Harcourts, First National, Little Projects, and many others that you might have heard of. That's in terms of the real estate industry. And in different industries, we also work with different advertisers, ranging from government agencies to parties like Medibank, Telstra, telecommunication services, banks, and hotel groups. For agent listings, we work with a range of third parties such as Agent Point and Port Plus to make sure that the XML feeds feed into us automatically, so there's no hassle. Now, to the recent sales we've made for our advertisers such as agents and developers, we've made quite a few of them in the last year or the last quarter or so, and here is some examples. So showing something we've done in selling green wedge land, helping buyers to bid at auctions. Here is that example that I mentioned earlier. Buyers come from the website, came to Australia, came to Melbourne. We make sure that we help them bid at the particular auction. They bought it, and now in fact they're on the process of getting the permits and application done to submit it to the city council and getting an apartment or getting multi-level apartments built, and we'll be using the same agent to sell the project as well. So also selling things like house and land packages and referring landlords to different parties. Now let's look at what would typically happen. So when a Chinese buyer sends out an inquiry, this is what you'll receive instantly. 你好，我们想了解这个房子的价格和户型图，谢谢. By the way, 谢谢 means thanks. And within 24 hours, we manually translate the inquiry in English and send it out to you, usually within 2 to 5 hours. So within 24 hours, you'll receive this, which hopefully you can understand, and then reply in English. We'll then translate it back to Chinese and send it on to the buyer. So that's our presentation. Well, thank you for your time. Please feel free to drop a line or fill in your details on the box, and we look forward to be of assistance to you shortly. Thank you. 谢谢.